Welcome to another episode of ZenChats. I'm Zenica, and I'm here with a very special guest today. Normally, I'm here interviewing NFT project founders, people who are in the NFT space and working on, their own NFT-related projects. This is a little different, and I'm very excited because I'm here with my old friend Jared Tendler. I've known Jared for, I think, almost a decade now.
It's gotta
So
be.
yeah, it's been a while. It goes all the way back to, listeners would know that I was a professional poker player before getting into this wild world. And Jared was like my mental game coach for several years, I think. Jared wrote 2 books on the mental game of poker and has since moved on to the mental game of trading. And we're going to like dig into sort of the mental side of this whole crazy world, I think. But yeah, no, just welcome, Jared. I'm so happy to have you here.
Yeah, thanks, Roy. It's good to see you as always. Just hearing your voice brings me back to our early days, and yeah, there's a lot we're going to talk about today, so I'm excited.
Yeah, it feels like another lifetime. Truly, it does.
Yeah, I sympathize with that, man.
A lot of people ask sort of me, what are the parallels between the poker world and the NFT and the crypto world, and what maybe like what skills are transferable or what helped me then to now. And I always say probably the single most important thing was understanding the mental side of things, because just getting more accustomed to the swings, like making and losing money, and like the emotional impact that can have on your decisions as well as just your personal life as well. And I think that having 15 years of experience as a professional poker player just helped tremendously, I think, when it came to decision making in this world. And I credit a lot of that to you, and like the books you wrote and the work that we did together. It really helped me sort of understand like just the psychology behind all of it. So honestly, just thank you first up. But I think it would be great if you could give a little bit of your background on sort of where you came from in terms of how did you even find yourself in doing mental game coaching for poker, and then into trading and stuff. Like what's your background?
Yeah, I certainly didn't go to college wanting to be a game coach for poker players. I sort of went to college with the intent of becoming a professional golfer myself. And I, got a business degree kind of as like a backup, or was going for a business degree as a backup plan, kind of if it doesn't work out. And so psychology really wasn't even on my radar. I took like one class in high school. I think I got a C in it. It was not, really was not. I mean, I think it was interesting, but it wasn't really for me. And so then, I had my first sort of experience up until that point, about 18 years old. I didn't really take a lot of lessons, got good very, very quickly, was always an athlete, but, got into golf late, got good very quickly, and suddenly kind of found myself in a spot where like I could actually move on to the second stage of qualifying for the US Open, right? US Open being one of the 4 majors, one of the biggest golf tournaments in the world.
Yeah.
There are 2 stages of qualifying, 18-hole first round, first stage. I was like on the precipice of kind of getting through, and basically kind of missed a bunch of these sort of short putts, and it was kind of the first time that I ever choked really in any sport. And so, it happens once, kind of talked to some friends about it. They introduced me to some golf psychology books that were out at the time, and they helped. I mean, my game kind of continued to rise. It was sort of a one-off, then I try again and fail, and then try to, US amateur, and like, then it starts to kind of get in your head and sort of becomes a thing unto itself. And yeah, I mean, we can get into the reasons for like kind of why that was happening maybe later. But as far as like the arc of my career, at that point, I'm kind of, in my junior year of college, realizing like, wow, like I'm not going to turn pro. But I sort of realized that the sports psychology, golf psychology material that I had read, while it was good, it didn't help me. It just didn't work in the moments where it mattered the most, when it should, right? That's what it's sort of all should be all about. And so I kind of reasoned like, well, if I can solve my issues, then I'll either have a career as a coach or as a therapist or whatever, or I'll be able to play professional golf. And so I dove into psychology, added a psychology major to my my program, finished my double major, went to Northeastern University to get a master's in counseling psychology. So basically try to become a therapist. I mean, technically I am a therapist, although I don't kind of practice under that. Spent 2 years getting supervised practice to get licensed. And the whole time I'm doing that is basically to kind of learn another sort of skill set. I thought therapists had the ability to kind of dig into the root causes of problems. And to me, sports psychology was just a little bit too kind of basic. It's like, well, you're, experiencing fear or FOMO or anger issues, and we're going to teach you to be more relaxed and calm down and, You're not confident. Well, we're going to boost your confidence. It just seemed, kind of 2 ones and zeros to me, and just didn't really feel, again, like it just didn't work. So to me, like the answer was, let's combine them both. Let's find a way to, look at performance-based issues from a deeper way. Sometimes that does get personal, but more often than not, it's just being a little bit more kind of robust and comprehensive about understanding the underlying reasoning for why I choked, for why other people struggle with, a variety of issues, whether they be motivational, procrastination, discipline issues, whether it be anger and fear and confidence issues, or, you name it. So, once I got my license, I quit my job, moved to Arizona to start working with golfers. Obviously, I knew golf well, and sort of started built up a practice working with some PGA Tour players, some LPGA Tour players, some good junior players. One kid I started working with was 10 years old. He's now on the kind of the tour just under the PGA Tour.
Wow.
Cool. So that's been fun to work with him over the last 13 years. And so, so about 2 or 3 years in, I sort of found myself in a spot where golfers were not really doing the work that I wanted them to do. Right. They still saw it as something that was like, they knew they needed it, but they weren't really willing to put the work in. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But ironically, I met a poker player who used to be a former professional golfer. So he immediately understood the value. And, you'll remember the Supernova Elite days on PokerStars. So he was trying to make Supernova Elite, which is basically like a year-long challenge to basically play 1 million hands of poker in 1 year, roughly.
Yeah.
And he was trying to do this in 8 months. First year it started, and he was making good money, but having extreme tilt, like literally just ripping the computer out of the wall, smashing it in the corner, breaking his monitor. And it was affecting his volume. Obviously, the computer equipment, the smallest cost
Right.
of this. He's making $30,000 a month. Who cares? It was the volume that was killing him. So after about 4 months of working together, not only did he get Supernova Elite, right on December 31st.
Yeah.
But he made about $600K in that period. So huge success. And it turned out that he was, kind of part of this online poker site, which you may remember, Stocks Poker. So basically kind of introduced me to the poker world and started building up a roster of clients and producing content, and just realizing that there was nobody kind of doing what I was doing in poker, and, had the opportunity to write those 2 books, meet you. And then traders started picking up the poker book saying, well, shit, I mean, you just changed the word poker to trading and you've got it all applies. It's all the same stuff. And so I started working with some traders. And then I met Victor Goosens, who's the co-founder of Team Liquid, one of the largest esports organizations in the world. And so for 4 years, I was the head of sports psychology for Team Liquid, working with their Dota team, the League of Legends team, the Counter-Strike team, traveling around the world, working with them. And part of the reason I say that as well is that, I've kind of honed and developed this system, right, that I kind of started in golf, then transferred it to trading, then transferred it to poker, then trading, then esports. And, it all applies. I mean, so we're talking about NFTs. We could be talking about, I work with a radiologist. I work with, professional sports bettors. I work with lawyers. I mean, it at the end of the day, like, we're all human beings first. And so there just isn't that much diversity in terms of how we operate. And if you understand some kind of basic principles about how the mind works, then you can develop a strategy or, utilize my system that is actually going to permanently correct the causes of a lot of the emotional problems that people experience. Because many, many people think of the fear and the FOMO and the greed and the anger and the confidence issues as being the problem. I'm not saying that they're not problematic, but I am saying that they're not the real problem, right? We have to kind of look beneath the surface. Those emotions are signals of problems. It's like, you've got a rock in your shoe. The signal that it's there is the pain when you step, right? But the rock is the problem, not the pain. And so that's a lot of kind of the work has been, I think kind of changing the way people even view this game. And I do much prefer the term mental game, because there's a strategy and a system, and there's it's not something you can just like pick up like a quick tip and your problems are instantly solved. If that happens, it wasn't really that big of a problem.
Right.
Yeah, I know I said a lot there, but
No, that was fantastic. I want to dig in a little more. You mentioned there's some sort of basic principles that maybe are applicable, across all these various domains. Can you maybe go into some detail about what those might be? Maybe using, say, FOMO as an example, because that's something that's very prevalent in the NFT space. People, we're on Twitter, hearing about projects. People around us are making millions, and we're like looking, a lot of people say, "Hey, I'm missing out," or if I don't buy this, I'm going to miss out on all the potential gains. What might be the underlying issues there, or the problems?
yeah, so there's sort of two things here, right? So fundamental principles, we have to understand really what emotions are doing to you. So when the emotional system gets overactive, right, it actually shuts down your ability to think clearly. So one of the biggest problems that people experience is they make mistakes when they're emotional, and then they get pissed off at the mistakes that they make for getting emotional.
Yeah.
And then there's like a whole cascade of additional problems that come with it. It's like, how could I be so dumb? So you lose confidence. I can't believe I effing did that. And so you get angry, right? You become even more anxious that you're going to miss out. I mean, there's just this sort of snowball of problems that come because of sort of the basic misunderstanding that you do not have the ability to control your emotions when they get that big. They're steamrolling you, right? So if you are going to work on your mental game, if you're going to try to improve FOMO, you have to start addressing it when it's small. And it's not even that big of a problem. Like, so for many of you, you actually need to do some work, and we'll get to some ideas about what this means. But the point being that you need to actually start working before you even open up Twitter, before you even open up some of your accounts and look at what's going on. Because if you get emotionally hijacked at that point, it's almost kind of game over at that point, right? You're the inevitable patterns that have already kind of caught you up in the past are going to happen again, right? We are not random, right? The mistakes we make happen again and again and again and again. They may show up in different forms, right? I think one of the interesting things I've seen, and maybe you experienced this as well, is like, take a poker player who then became a trader, became a crypto trader, or, like you involved in NFTs. And it's like, well, yeah, I actually made a lot of progress with my tilt issue, but now it's kind of showing back up again in the exact same form. It's like, well,
Yeah.
crap, like I thought I solved it. Right. So the point is, right, there's a lot of patterning to the way that we react. And if you can study that pattern, right, understand the sort of the escalation that your emotions typically go through, right? So FOMO, when it's bad, right, as you're experiencing it on Twitter and wherever else, what's called that like level 8 through 10, right? Describe what it is like when your emotions are that high, when your FOMO is that high. Describe what it's like, but try to describe the level below that, right? Level, let's say, 3 through 6 or 4 through 6. What's going on at that stage? And then can you even identify the earliest warning signs that you might be susceptible to FOMO today? Maybe for some of you, it's every day you're susceptible to it. But, I think as you get kind of farther and more advanced, both mentally and, kind of in the community, right, there will be some of those earlier warning signs. So, for example, I had a trading client who he recognized that FOMO began the second that he started thinking about the utility of the money that he was making. So he was thinking about it in terms of just kind of raw P&L percentages, much more of the sort of in-game, within the market kind of based perspective, like that was fine. But as soon as he started thinking about utility, that was his understanding that there's a divergence. And if he didn't act then, the sort of cascade of mistakes were somewhat inevitable. So what are some of the underlying roots of FOMO? I actually think that FOMO is almost as bad of a term as tilt was for poker players.
Okay.
So a little backstory, right? You'll know this. Tilt, when I came into poker, was quite literally like the term used for anything other than playing your best.
Yeah.
You could be drunk. You could be exhausted. You could be distracted on your phone. I mean, it's like, yada, yada. I tilted and I lost a bunch of money.
Yeah.
It's just shorthand for basically getting emotional, doing something stupid and losing. So I think FOMO is getting pretty close to being as bad of a term, because if you actually break down the word fear of missing out, most of the time it's actually has nothing to do with fear. Okay.
Yeah, that's wild.
Fear of missing out You are pissed off if you miss out. You are greedily going after making money without having any idea what the hell you're doing. You are you have no confidence, and if you were to miss out on this, opportunity, what would that say about you? It would say that you don't know anything, you're a piece of shit. Like, it just, so FOMO in its purest form, if it is actually the fear of missing out, then the flaw that is beneath that is this illusion that this is going to be the last opportunity, which on the surface, is not correct, is not real. But in the moment where that thing gets triggered, you believe it's like, oh, I have to get this one now, otherwise, that's it, and that's it. There's not another flaw. There's not another thing that I've seen, and I'm happy to be wrong, that would explain the sort of pure fear of missing out. Everything else has to do with anger, which could be like missing out would be a mistake. Missing out could be a lack of perfection. There's a lot of people that have high expectations of themselves. They have this desire for perfection. They have this desire for maximizing profit in ways that are not really feasible or practical, or they don't realize that people that were able to got just dead lucky, because you can't kind of time tops and bottoms of markets. I was literally just talking about this with my brother-in-law, who's a real estate agent, and in the US, the real estate market is just insane. And he's talking about how sellers are pissed off that they didn't wait a month to make $30K. It's like, it's just insane, right? So the perfection is a huge reason why people don't want to miss out. There's a feeling of injustice, like, oh, how could this person make? They don't know what they're talking about. I'm so much better. So there's a lot. Like, I think if you're going to like really try to solve your FOMO, you got to start to ask these why questions when you experience it, right? Okay, you can feel the impulse. Okay, why is it that I'm feeling that way? What would happen if I were to miss out? Is that okay? Would it feel like I lost? Am I too competitive? Does it feel like a mistake? I mean, just brainstorm around some of the things I just mentioned. And that's the beginning of kind of changing the game for you. Right now, you're no longer getting caught up, swept up in the emotion. You have an ability to kind of take a step back and observe it and separate yourself, so you can actually understand what the hell it is, right? Pick up the rock in your shoe and figure out what the heck it is, because it's gonna end up right back in your shoe until you figure out what it is and can solve it.
Wow, that makes total sense. I mean, I myself am guilty, of throwing around the term FOMO just left, right, and center, because everyone in this space is always talking about it, and it's a sign that there are issues relating to the mental game that are prevalent everywhere, but it's not always the fear of missing out. And I think just hearing you talk through that, I started thinking about some of the times that I've felt FOMO, and I think it has come down to like being a perfectionist, and also that competitive nature, and sort of maybe feeling like if I miss out on a project that all of my friends or that all of the community, the smart money, quote unquote, is in, and I'm not a part of it, I might feel like dumb, or that people might look like I am lesser of a person or a trader because I decided not to go into this project that went on to moon, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, that's truly fascinating, I think, and I think that'll resonate with a lot of people.
Yeah. So maybe just because we're used to it, kind of throw you back in the couch here. Right. So I think it'd be helpful to kind of work through it with you a little bit, because I think it'll give others some insight as to like what those next steps are, right? So now you've identified, right? Okay, so there's more of a confidence issue kind of at the root of what's going on here. Now, one of the things that I've realized since you and I have kind of last done a session is that the antidote to the sort of dynamic that high expectations and perfectionism create is not what most people would think it is. So what I hear a lot is, well, if high expectations are bad, what am I supposed to do? Just lower my expectations? And the answer is no, because having big aspirations, having big goals for yourself, believing that you are capable of great things is great. I applaud that. I want more of that. But the reason that high expectations are damaging is because when you hit your expectation, you get zero confidence for it. if you fall below your expectation, which is going to happen a majority of the time because those expectations are so high, you're going to lose confidence in a way that is unfair.
Mm.
Right? Because you've got high expectations, in my mind, you have misrepresented your current skill set. And as a result, your confidence is going to lower relative to your actual skill. Because when we look at confidence, confidence is just perception, right? Confidence is the perception of your skill. And in a new space like this, I mean, we haven't formulated what the skill sets are, right? You've got to have some artistic abilities. You've got to have the ability to be kind of like a trendsetter. You've got to have maybe mathematical abilities, probabilities, ability to handle losing, right? Like you mentioned being a poker player. You've got to be able to network. You've got to be able to do research, understand platforming, coding. I mean, like, what are the skill set? And so, yes, there's a lot of people that are kind of capitalizing in the market from having lots of different skills. But the reality is, like, it's very, very difficult to firmly pinpoint what defines your skill set so that you can have kind of that perfect confidence.
Yeah.
You know, as we know from poker, is really difficult. The same in trading, right? By the time you know what your edge is, the game has changed and it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
And so trying to get your perception of your skill to be as accurate as possible is made easier when these expectations are kind of gone, right?
Yeah.
And kind of recalibrated so that you can have your aspirations, right, your motivation, right, matched with your confidence kind of going along for the ride. And that's what happens with high expectations. Your confidence flatlines, right? It stays artificially low because you're seeing yourself in the wrong way. And so one of the things that I have clients do, and you know, this is anybody that wants to know more, right? This is cleanly articulated in chapter 7 of the trading book, where I talk about perfectionism and go through this whole kind of protocol of what to do. But the basic premise is you got to go back into your personal history. You got to go back into your poker history, maybe. You got to, and certainly have to go back into your NFT history and think about your accomplishments that have gone under-recognized and write about how you did it. What skills were present? What did you learn from the process? And sure, what mistakes were made? By thinking about your results or your accomplishments in this way, you know, and we're not just often looking for the big ones, but the small ones too, you help to start to recapture the data that the expectations did not give a shit about, right? Expectations only want what they want. Make that money, get in that project, whatever you're expecting yourself, it just wants what it wants. It doesn't care how. But when we look at things from a much more goal-oriented standpoint, then you get credit for every step of the way. You get credit for developing skill, even if it's falling below that threshold of competency that would get you the results you're after, right? If you're not building confidence as you're progressing, eventually you're going to create this big gap between your aspirations and your confidence. And that gap is what can create FOMO.
Wow. I love that. I think one of the things I've always loved about, you know, your approach and your books is that you have like these practical tasks or like, you know, things that you can actually do and put together like a pool of data or like actual, you know, information that you can analyze and look at and look back upon and evaluate over time and see like tangible things that you can, because so much of this space and poker, trading, NFTs, it's like we're dealing in the abstract, in the intangibles. It's like, what do you really need to do? How do you do it? What's the real value in all of this? It's like, it's guesswork, right? It's like, all right, maybe there's a 60% chance that this is a good thing. Maybe, you know, who really knows? It's just, it's gut feeling. It's all of that. But to be able to do anything to bring that back to reality, I think, and look at, you know, hard figures or analytics or whatever it might be, especially like if you're looking internally and at your own actions and past, I think it's just really powerful. Yeah. What are some of the things that I want to go to trading a little bit, because I would say that the parallels from trading are probably even greater to NFT trading than poker, even though they're similar. But what are some of the maybe issues that you've found pop up time and time again for traders?
So I think one of the biggest ones is the sort of heuristic of kind of greed and fear being like kind of it. And I think traders have kind of been surprised to realize how much anger is actually there too, right? Which is kind of the opposite of poker, which is interesting. But the media sort of just portrays this: the market is either greedy or fearful, and it's like it's not that simple, right? It's great for headlines, but it's not great for an individual trying to improve themselves. And so we can kind of look at sort of two sides of that, right? So the greed side, I think, was kind of fascinating because, I mean, what is greed really, right? Like, greed is like the desire to make more money, the desire to have more success, but in a way that's somehow wrong. And so it just was like kind of confusing to me early on, because it's like, well, as a trader, your job, as a poker player, your job is to make money. And so then we think about like athletes, like golfers, right? I had a guy down at the Players Championship a couple weeks ago. Or was it last week? Oh my God. Yeah. Like, is he greedy, wanting to win? No. Like, is Tom Brady, Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, Serena Williams, like elite athletes, like, are they greedy for wanting to win more and more and more? No one would ever say that. But we can see within, athletics, and certainly in poker and trading, where that desire for more, that desire to win, actually makes you, or causes you to make mistakes, it costs you money because you're overextending, you're over leveraged, right? Baseball player, right, wants to turn a single into a double and gets called out, right? Football player speeding down, tries to make a big play, ends up, leading to a goal the other way. I mean, it just, things like that happen all the time, right? So there's this sort of line where your attempts to make money actually then are kind of bite you in the ass. And it's like, that is the problem. It's just excessive ambition gone awry, right? That's it. And so then when we look at like, well, what are the reasons why somebody's ambition, what's going to cause the greed? There really aren't any unique traits, flaws, illusions, biases, whatever, at the root of greed. They all come from overconfidence, fear, anger, and lacking confidence. And so that was kind of the big eye opener for me, was like, all right, I'll talk about greed because you all are talking about greed.
Yeah.
But once we get past that initial conversation, just kind of ignore it, because it really isn't consequential, because your job is to make money. Your job is to try to maximize what you're trying to do. So it's sort of relevant. Then we look at the other side, like the fear side. This one I think is quite interesting, because a lot of people have gotten into trading, as I would imagine, have gotten into NFTs with zero barriers to entry. If you are going to play golf on the PGA Tour, if you're going to be in the European Premier League, if you're going to play Australian rules football, you have to go through a lot of different gatekeepers along the way that say, yeah, you're good to go to the next level. Yep, you're good. Nope, you're out, right? And so the natural selection process happens in those sports. And when I've worked with, kind of institutional trading firms, same thing happens there, right? You don't get a seat on the desk unless you are hand selected as somebody who is elite and capable of being the kind of trader they want to be. But for those who are listening to this podcast, I would imagine that your barrier to entry is just the capital that is in your account. And so what happens when you go from sitting at your desk to somehow competing on the PGA Tour? Like, of course you're going to feel pressure. Of course you're going to feel nervousness and probably some fear. So I think in the trading world, fear has been sort of exaggerated as a thing, because there's an inherent intensity to competing at the highest levels of anything. Any athlete that I've worked with, any athlete that I've heard talk, when they get like kind of bored, right, when they're not feeling that intensity, that's how they know they should retire. So if you are feeling some intensity when you turn on your computer and you're looking at these marketplaces, or you're looking on Twitter and you're seeing what the action, maybe some of that fear of missing out is not actually fear of missing out. It's you getting swept up in the intensity of the market. And that is normal and that is natural, except the sweeping up part. Like, to feel all that is normal now.
Right.
What you do about it is very different. And I would strongly argue that at the very low levels, pressure is just a distraction. Now, for me, when I was choking, I did not know this. And this, I believe, is one of the reasons why I was choking. Because what happens, right? I have a 4-foot putt. I know where I am in the tournament. I have to make it, right? If I'm going to have a chance, I know, right? And so, yeah, my heart is beating at 140. I can feel my hands sweating. My hands are literally shaking. And if I think that that experience is wrong, then all of a sudden now there's more anxiety and there's more pressure. So yeah, of course I have no chance. But if I were instead to say, okay, I feel this way. It's normal. This is how I should feel because it matters. I care. So burrow your way into it like the elite athletes do, and don't let it be a distraction. Use it to fuel your ability to sense the subtle details in at least for me, the putt, right? We can do a little experiment right now. Okay. You can play along too. Okay. I want you to focus on your feet.
All right.
Everybody playing along at home, just focus on your feet. Take a deep breath and just feel your feet. Not something you tend to do, right? Unless there's pain, but just focus on your feet. And at the same time, I want you to continue to hear my voice, not focus on your feet, but hear my voice, right? Continue to hear what I'm saying to you as I'm talking, but you have to keep focused on your feet. And what happens, right? You go through this sort of mental switch where your mind is kind of oscillating between those two sort of sensory inputs, right? You're feeling the sensation of your feet while trying to hear my voice and understand and comprehend it. When you are experiencing that low level of pressure, your mind gets turned inward, right? You start to focus more on the sensations in your body, or some of them you react and you escape it and you no longer become kind of connected and tuned in. But the point is, if you were to just understand that it's fine that you feel this way, it's actually good that you feel this way because it means that you care. It means that you're now participating in this worldwide marketplace, which is insanely competitive, where nobody has any clear answers. And so the uncertainty explodes even more, kind of fear and anxiety. And so the fact that you're feeling this thing is a good thing. So enjoy it, make it part of it, right? Don't try to escape it or don't try to focus too much on it. Use it. And if you do that, you take away a chunk of what normally gets sort of classified as fear. And now we can actually deal with the inherent biases that you are going to imprint in the market where you say, I don't really feel like that's actually as viable of an opportunity, going against your intuition that's saying otherwise, right? That bias could be coming from, a desire for control, right? A desire to have perfect information, right? A fear of losing money, right? And so it's not really based on the purity of your mind's ability to sense the opportunity. It's instead coming from this bias that wants you to avoid pain in the future of losing money or feeling stupid or whatever else that it is. So, those kinds of biases has to get eventually teased out. But I don't think we can do a good job of that if we're not, kind of embracing the inherent pressure and intensity and nervousness that comes just with competing, in this market.
Yeah, I know. I love that. I think I'm noticing sort of a general underlying theme that you keep coming back to, and that's sort of a lot of what we think is happening is not actually happening. It's like there's a lot going on beneath the surface, or that is, the pain and the rock and the shoe example again. It's like there's what we think is a problem is not really the problem. There's something else, which in order to sort of take control of, our feelings, our thoughts, our emotions, and make better decisions, recognizing that is like the first step. I remember something, I think it was in your first book, you talked about like the 4 stages of like knowing or consciousness. And it's like there's unconsciousness where you don't know what you don't know. And then there's, you're going to...
unconscious incompetence.
Okay, yeah.
So you don't know what you're bad at. And many of listeners now are like, you don't know what you don't know yet about your emotional reactivity, which I think is kind of where you're going with this. So then the next step, when you start asking that why question, why do I feel angry here? Why am I losing confidence here? Right? Those why questions help you to discover and get to that next stage, which is now conscious incompetence. And one of the biggest mistakes people make at this stage is like, I figured it out. Now I've got it. It's like, well, that stage is like stepping to the starting line of a race, right? You think you're finished. No. Like you're actually at the beginning of it, right? Awareness is just the beginning. Then you actually have to do the work to solve the root cause of that emotional reaction, right? And so then the third stage is called conscious competence. Once you understand kind of what's causing it. So in your case, let's say the expectation of perfection. So you do the accomplishment work that I've described. You pull out a statement or a phrase that helps you to connect to that kind of reservoir of accomplishments that, in those moments where you start to lose confidence, you inject into that moment. You're like, no, you're right. Okay. While I don't have perfect information here, no one does either. Right. But I do lean on my experience, and I have this experience. And so I don't have perfect information here. I might make mistakes, and that's okay, but I'll learn from them. And it's all kind of part of the process. And you say that to yourself. And in the moment you believe it, and your confidence kind of rises or stabilizes in that moment. But the key is, right, that you have to keep saying that to yourself again and again and again and again until it becomes automatic. And this is not like brainwashing, right? It's about like internalizing and upgrading your perspective so that the old perspective is gone and the biases and the flaws and the illusions, whatever, are kind of gone. And when you reach that stage, you've now reached unconscious competence. And now, right, whether we're talking about mental game or anything else, really, driving a bike or driving a car, riding a bike, you name it, right? Automated skills are trained at this level. They exist, right? Unconscious competence. You're automatically good at it without thinking. And that is powerful, right? That is where the transformation really happens, because if you are forced to use your mind in these moments when your confidence could drop or, fear is rising, like it's you're trying to kind of fight yourself at the same time. You're trying to capitalize on opportunities, and you really can't do both great, right? You can do both. And sometimes in trading, sometimes, with NFTs, right, you don't have to make instantaneous decisions, but sometimes you do. When you do, you will not be at your best if one hand is fighting yourself and the other hand is trying to grab hold of the opportunity. The long-term solution is to actually get to that stage where you correct the problem. It's just gone, right? And that is possible, again, because we're not getting rid of your emotions, just like we're not getting rid of your ability to feel, right? To have sensation, right? Emotions are just another form of sensation in that regard, right? They're signals of there's signals of these underlying biases and flaws and illusions that we have of ourselves, of NFTs, of the world, right? We don't have perfect information, right? We have built up in our lives, kind of wrong perceptions, right? And, one of the basic misperceptions from a performance standpoint is thinking that fear or pressure is bad, right? At that basic level, right? That was the flaw that I was bringing into my competitive golf, and that flaw caused me to choke. So we don't have to have these like deep personal issues, right? Like, stuff with your parents being the thing that is tripping you up and making your decisions. By all means, that can be true. But there's this layer of performance issues, right? High expectations, illusions of control, hindsight bias, confirmation bias, expecting perfection, hating mistakes, hating to lose. I mean, in the book, I talk about 30 of these suckers, right? There's a lot of underlying flaws and biases and illusions that can cause those emotional reactions. And when you go through those sort of 4 stages of learning and get to that level of unconscious competency, your mind is now freed up to automatically be able to perform better, to think clear, to think without bias, and be much more like a sponge. I mean, you want to be more sponge-like, where you're absorbing information and making sense of it. You don't want to be taking your beliefs and imprinting them in the market. That is how you get run over. So the more you can understand the things that you are pushing into the market, your hopes and dreams are now pushed in the market. Well, the market's going to say to that.
Yeah.
So unless you get lucky, the more you can understand the things that you're pushing into the market, the easier it is for you to then be able to work through them and correct it.
Yeah, that was about 1,000 times more eloquent than I was trying to explain it. But I do think about it quite frequently. And that example you gave about riding a bike or driving a car. Driving a car is the one I always come to. It's like, we don't think, if you got to drive a car to begin with, you have to think about absolutely everything. Actually, I think in the book you use the example and you walk through it. But at the final stage, it's like you no longer think about changing gears or, I have to brake, and leave this distance in front of me and check my blinds. You just do it automatically because it's unconscious competence. And it's,
Yeah. And the cool thing that I forgot to mention too, which is why it's so powerful is because now your mind is freed up to do other stuff, right? So you can actually eat while driving, right?
Yeah.
Safely, not text. Texting actually is almost like being drunk.
Yeah.
But from a trading standpoint, from an NFT standpoint, when your mind is freed up, right, it just means that you have more bandwidth to learn more, to perceive more, to be a better sponge, and to do so without you kind of getting in the way of kind of contaminating that data. So yeah, I mean, I think that kind of mental freedom from your own emotional issues is something that a lot of people don't typically think about. The predominant viewpoint is I need to be in control of my emotions, right? That's like kind of the end game. And for me, like, no. Controlling your emotions is a tool, is a strategy in the short term to help you get to the point where you resolve the problem, right? Get to that unconscious competency where the emotion for that reason is gone, right? You could, some people are never going to, enjoy losing money. I mean, it's pretty
That's fair.
natural, right?
Yeah.
And that's fine. But there are people who, don't need to get excessively angry about the losing, right? Sometimes, so there's like the losing is painful, right? Because you just hate losing, right? And that's normal. But then there's the hatred of losing because it feels like your goals are now a step back, like you're now taking a step backward. Well, that is not always true. Very often you kind of fail forward, right? Where you lose and you learn something because of that. And so you're actually a step closer to your goals. But the misperception is that you're not. And so you hate losing more. And so you can get to the point where you can solve the anger associated with that misperception. And if you do that, well, then the experience of the losing should go like this, right? For a lot of traders, poker players, right? When you lose money, it might hurt for 15 minutes, an hour, maybe 2. But when there's layers of anger on top of it, now it hurts for days, sometimes weeks. And that is where it's significantly problematic. So yes, you can get to the point where your emotions are resolved. And, the example I give in the book, I think, is kind of a simple one that many people have experienced, is like getting into an argument with a friend or a significant other, right? And you can feel the tension between you, right?
Yeah.
But the second that you talk it out or forgive each other or apologize, whatever it is, right? That tension is just gone. And if it is a situation, I mean, I've experienced this with my wife, all the numbers of instances where I've fucked up, right? I have learned more about what I need to do to be a better husband or a better father, whatever it is. And so the tension that gets generated from those mistakes, which I'm defensive about, which then makes the situation worse, ultimately leads to better understanding for me and for her and for us. Like, so then it's not just about getting rid of the emotion and kind of getting back to normal. It's actually about getting a deeper connection. And so for, each of us individually, as we're working on our own performance issues, as you understand yourself better, right? Not only do you get to release these emotions and progress so that they don't happen again, but it actually becomes easier for you to maintain stability and to progress over time, because you're not going to make that mistake again. If learning or, attempting to, be successful is like completing a complicated maze, well, then all we're talking about is, hitting those dead ends and then walling it off so you just never make that mistake again as you're trying to navigate your way through. So yeah, when your mind is freed up to learn new stuff, it's a powerful thing, not to mention that you no longer have to kind of defend against your own stupidity again.
That's a really good way of putting it. I mean, I could dig into that some more, and I could dig into everything more, but I want to jump to a slightly different topic on burnout. So this is something I struggled with a lot as a poker player. You mentioned before the whole Supernova Elite thing where you had to play 1 million hands in a year, and that's like a lot of time in front of a screen playing poker. And I would do great for a month or two, and then I'd just play so much I'd burn out, and I'd have to take time off. I'd play poorly, and then I ran into issues where like I couldn't take time off because I had to play, and it was a whole thing. I think in the NFT space, myself and most people who are in the space feel like the longer you're in the space after a couple of months, it feels like on the one hand, there's so many opportunities, and it feels like, well, I don't want to take time off. I don't want to take a break because there's so much money that could be made. There's so much fun that could be had. There's so many people and communities that are just having a good time, and I don't want to miss being a part of that. Just there's so much happening and so much upsides. Like, all right, well, it's fun, it's exciting. I could make money. I'm just gonna wake up, go on my phone, and then for the next 16 hours, I'll be in the NFT space, and then sleep. And then 2 months later, people start getting fed up, burnt out. They're like, I need a break, or like, it's draining. And I think a lot of people are maybe in that position now. What sort of strategies would you sort of maybe recommend, or how would you maybe approach, assuming this is something that someone wants to be their full-time job, managing burnout or preventing or avoiding burnout?
Yeah, it's tricky because I think in some respects, like, yeah, this is a unique opportunity, right? There are things that are happening now. This is not like professional sports where the season is just sort of there and you do the work in advance and you go and participate when somebody else has said. It's like, no, this is a Wild West, wide open marketplace, rapidly evolving. And yeah, I'm not saying that you have to stay glued, 16 hours a day, but I am saying you might have to kind of forego the sort of normal conception of what normal even is, in the short term, and understand that, yeah, you might push yourself to burn out and then maybe take, 3 or 4 weeks off once you feel like you've kind of reached this level. I think where it gets problematic on some level is this feeling like that engine and that has just been going for so long, you actually have accomplished more, you kind of gotten farther along, and you're still not allowing yourself to take that break, right? That I think is where things get problematic. And one of the things that is really kind of dangerous in that state of mind is you really don't realize how much your perception starts to get altered. I actually haven't done this, so I don't know that it's on YouTube, but I've seen the research, and if you look at like sleep studies, if you take a normal person, you and I, assuming we're both normal, and you do not let us sleep for 3 or 4 days, we're going to start to hallucinate. We're going to start to see things that aren't there. We're going to start to hear things that, you will go clinically insane from lack of sleep. So that's an extreme. What happens on like the lower levels of what we're calling burnout, right? There's no way that your perception of what's happening is the same as when you're nice and clear and fresh and, oh man, had a great vacation, you come back and you're clear-minded. It's like, wow, you see things very differently. And I think people genuinely miss the opportunity to generate that more frequently and understand the upside that comes with having a clear mind and having a fresh perspective, more often, right? That you are going to make different decisions. I'm not going to say that you're 100% going to make better decisions, but you're certainly going to make different decisions, and probably on average, you're going to make better decisions. And so kind of understanding that, I think, can give you a little bit of freedom to take some time off. And, I'm certain you experienced it as a poker player to come back, and there's a certain consolidation that kind of happens too, right? You're focusing your energy in kind of in only, certain ways. You take a break and you're able to kind of come back and interface it in a slightly different way. I did that this past year. I took 3 months off from coaching, first time in 17 years that I had done that. And, it gave me a fresh perspective. And actually then I made some decisions about what I was going to do and kind of dove in. And then when I took another break at the end of December for a couple of weeks, it was like, wow, okay, yeah, I was mostly right with what I wanted to do, but I actually missed a couple key things, and taking that step back was really important. I had some assumptions about what I wanted to do that were not, I was just kind of just going, right. And didn't really have that chance to step back. So perspective on burnout. What I would say is, taking care of your most basic kind of physical needs of, kind of sleep, diet, exercise. Again, when you can kind of create like these like mini vacations throughout the day, they are more consequential than you realize. Having yourself tethered to your phone for far longer than you need means that your consumption of information is just primarily going this way, and you're not able to kind of squeeze it out. You're not able to kind of consolidate it and make sense of it, and then be able to have a fresh perspective with which you can then absorb more information. So when you stop absorbing information, whether that's on the internet or on your phone, or even having conversations, right? Go for a walk, take a 15-minute nap where you're not even sleeping, you're just closing your eyes and shutting off all that noise. It's actually really, small but powerful. And I think if you're going to look to sort of sustain yourself at a high level of output for a long time, you've got to look for some of these inefficiencies, right? We talked about this with Supernova Elite. You got to make sure that you're buttoned up with your sleep, right? You cannot allow the phone next to it in bed, right? So you get good sleep, you wake up, and then throughout the day, you're taking these mini breaks where you can kind of squeeze out some of the data, come back with fresh perspective, and just kind of maintain yourself. But the other thing, and I remember this from our talks as well, is start to write down your signs of burnout, right? So I talked earlier about, all right, well, what are the signs of FOMO bad, or versus when it's just beginning? You can do the exact same thing for burnout, right? What are the first signs of burnout? For me, I get kind of like a tensionness headache-ish. It's not even a headache. It's just my head feels off. That's the first thing that I know when my mind is not. So, but then you go all the way down to the bottom where it's just kind of like pure exhaustion. And so, but what are all the data points between those two? And the more that you can recognize that, the easier it is to then kind of take steps to avoid kind of the big crash. And if you want to maintain yourself in the community and try to take as much advantage as you can, well, if you can recognize those points where you get to, let's say, 5 or 6 on your burnout scale, then the recovery might just be a day off, right? Which isn't that big a deal. But if you get to 10, maybe you actually need like weeks off to recover. So, if you're going to kind of push yourself to that edge constantly, you've got to look for a lot of small things to create like kind of rest and consolidation of data. And then you've got to look at that scale so that when you've got to take some, kind of bigger, make some different decisions to recover.
Yeah, I mean, I think that again makes total sense. One thing that really stood out was recognizing that if you're just in the space 16 hours a day, consuming information, having information, and not giving yourself a chance to process it, you're really not doing yourself any favors. And it's a case where taking some short breaks is actually going to improve quality of whatever your thoughts in the space or your actions or your investments and all that kind of stuff. And I think that, a lot of people, myself included, at times think, well, I don't want to miss something. I don't want to be out of the space. It's more valuable for me to just stay plugged in 24/7 or 16 hours a day. But when you do take a step back, you realize, hang on, it's actually overall way, way, way more valuable to take a little bit of a time, a little bit of a break to process all that information. Yeah.
Yeah. Imagine you are like a samurai sword.
Okay. That sounds awesome.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're actually going to go into battle, that thing has to be sharp, right? So your mind is that edge. And if it is blunt, if it's dulled because you've got too much crap in your head, because you're drained and fatigued, then yeah, you could be fighting as hard as you possibly can and, causing pain to limbs, but not actually, doing some real damage. So yeah, if you're going to actually have success in this market, right, your mind has to be sharp.
So you've mentioned a few times like the concept of writing stuff down and having sort of systems and tasks and processes. What I mean, I'd love to talk to you for 20,000 hours and just keep going into all sorts of detail about all, like, honestly, I have a list of questions that we're not going to get a chance to get to yet, but if someone's part 2, if someone's listening and they do want to find out more, you have 3 books or three and a half books, right? You've got the 2 mental game of poker 1 and 2, and the mental game of trading, and then the half one is
it's like this. Well, it's like an ebook that's for free on my website.
Okay.
So if you have the mental game of poker 2, you don't need the ebook. Or if you want something consolidated, it's like 30 pages long. So it's really like 3 in it and 1.
3 and a bit.
Yeah.
What would you say? I mean, I recommend people just read all your books, basically, if I've been telling someone. But if someone were to pick up one of the 3, for example, would you say the trading one is more aligned to this NFT space, or do you think just starting from the first one has a good place?
Yeah, so I actually wouldn't tell people to read all 3. I would say pick the poker book or the trading book because they're kind of on equal playing. It's really about kind of like getting rid of the crap, right? The stuff that's kind of holding you back. The mental game of poker too is really about getting in the zone more often, improving your focus, learning more efficiently, increasing mental endurance, and avoiding burnout. So I would say, right, that the trading book would be the one to start with because it's 10 years newer, right? My system is more systematized. There's things that are kind of built out, in quite a bit more robust of a way. That is kind of more the rub. I mean, the poker book is still valid. It's still selling quite well for poker players. I'd say if you maybe wanted something that was a little more simple, maybe the poker book is, just because I wasn't as good of a writer back then. I don't know. So it's just shorter. But the trading book is more robust. And I will say for sure, right? It is not a novel, right? This is not like spoiler alert at the end. Don't jump ahead. I mean, this is, you can choose your own adventure here. If you want to, I said this to somebody on Twitter this morning. If you want to jump right into the tilt chapter, jump right into the tilt chapter, right? You're going to need to work your way back to understand the strategy and the system and what to do about it. But if you want to jump right into it and just get some information that can help you immediately, because it's going to take some time to read, you can do that. I mean, you also can just listen to me reading it to you. The audiobook is available too, but
those are great. Audiobooks are great, especially when the author is also the person,
which is true.
Yeah. And you also have a webinar coming up soon. Can you share some details about that?
Yeah. So April 9th, it starts. It's going to be recorded. So if you're listening to this after that, you don't have to worry about it, but it's basically going to be a 5-part workshop webinar series for traders. I suspect that there will be non-traders there as well. And really what it's going to do is kind of bring the book to life and, kind of give people the ability to kind of work with me in the trenches as they develop their strategy and kind of work through their issues and use and learn the tools that I use with my clients. So it becomes kind of like a group one-on-one session, at the same time that, this sort of 8-week phase where, kind of the first webinar to the last webinar, becomes a chance to really develop and hone, kind of a complete strategy to, solve the biggest issues that are affecting, you. So, there's information on my website about it.
We'll post links down below.
Yeah, there is still a kind of a discount if you're, kind of hearing this soon, but, April 9th it starts and it's going to be
people can sign up all the way up till then.
They can sign up at any point. I mean, I think
any point. Yeah.
We're expecting there to be some signups in the middle because I think once people start to see the value of some of the tools that we're using, I think it's going to be, quite a bit of kind of signups afterwards. I don't know that we're doing a phenomenal job of like kind of marketing what this thing is, ahead of time. So I think that'll happen. But then the other thing is that it will be recorded and packaged. So if you are listening to this and it's, June 4th and you've missed the whole thing, like that's fine. You just don't get the personalized advice, but you're going to get to see a lot of people, get advice and, kind of work through the tools that I use, so that it'll be easier for you to actually kind of walk through that same process, and develop them for yourselves. Cause again, I think the way that I really pitch my work is, it's probably already apparent now, is like, it is a lot like building muscle, right? This is not like getting a quick tip that certainly kind of transforms your mindset, right? You can change your mindset in an instant, but can you change it in a way that's fundamentally upgrading and building the foundational skills and competencies or muscle that can sort of sustain you for the long term? And, just like we can't go to the gym and suddenly have bigger muscles, right?
Sadly.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this isn't the Matrix, right? We can't just download, program to fly helicopter or program to, make money in NFTs.
Yeah.
But so like the mental game is the same thing. So it's really about like understanding the road that you have to kind of go through to develop the skills, the competencies, and ultimately, solutions to your problems.
Yeah. Is there going to be, do you have plans to do future webinars as well?
I mean, probably, yeah. My, just like kind of timing wise, probably not over the summer. Cause once this thing is done, I'm going to actually play more golf and try to ramp up my competitive aspirations again. I think I want to, take another crack at it. I've got the US Open qualifier in about a month. So yeah, I'm gonna get ready for that. And next year I think will be the year that I'm doing a lot more high level golf stuff. But my guess is come the fall, more webinars, workshops will probably happen, or I'll come up with something else as far as, things that the community needs. I did a big survey earlier in the year to figure out kind of what the needs were. And this trading webinar series is kind of touching all of the boxes of what people are looking for, right? They want accountability. They want case studies. They want like kind of step-by-step on how to use these tools. They want, some kind of peer interaction. There's going to be a forum associated with the webinar series. So I'm not going to be kind of deeply involved in that, but if you want to be able to interact with other traders, because I think a lot of people are kind of isolated, less so in the NFT space as far as what I've seen. But a lot of traders tend to be more isolated. So there's that. But I mean, I'm a promoter of the mental game. So, whatever makes sense. So if there's big needs to fill, maybe you and I will hook up and do something.
Yeah, no, that would be fantastic. I'm sure that I'm sure that I'm going to get a lot of people who will watch this video or listen to the podcast and reach out and be like, I want to know more. How do I know more? Actually, that's a good question. How can people find you? Where is we'll have links to everything, your website, you're on Twitter. What's the best place if people want to get in touch?
Yeah, I mean, my website and Twitter are the two best. I mean, I'm pretty active on Twitter. I respond to almost every comment, question that's posted. I like that stuff, so I'm happy to do it. You can contact me on through my website if you're interested in coaching. Coaching backlog is starting to get a little bit deeper, especially with this webinar series here. But I've got tons of free downloads in terms of like worksheets that you can use. The free audio, the free ebook on intuition is there. There's a lot of content. I also have run this like office hours, which is kind of a monthly Q&A thing on YouTube. So there's links to all those. So there's a lot of stuff that I put out there, over the years. So if they want more, there's a lot there between books and podcasts and webinars.
And definitely, the books. All right. Well, thank you so much. This has been honestly just a fun and interesting conversation as always. And I wasn't expecting to have like a couch moment, but I feel like I learned something. Like I really do. I'm coming out of this chat more calm. Like it's just, it has that effect. So thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, good to see you again, Roy, and happy to have the conversation. It was enjoyable for me too.